Hello, you wonderful people. So for today's video, I've talked about it a couple times before, but the whole aspect of endings. In this particular case, I want to fine tune it more specifically to series finales. I mean, I guess it still could apply to endings in general, but it's like, what makes a good series finale? And I think that's such an interesting discussion because, you know, I've watched a lot of stuff, you know, come to an end. Not just like, oh, it was canceled and it came to an end. I don't mean shows where it's like the season finale was retroactively turned into the series finale because the show got canceled and never got another season. No, I'm talking about things where they specifically went into it being like, this is the series finale, whether it be like, oh, this is the final, most likely like we're going into the final season and this is the final episode ever type of thing. That's what I'm trying to get at. So the whole conversation I want to have, it's like I said, what makes a good ending? Now, because I've heard recent, like I'm going to use a great example of a series finale, more recent. Granted, you know, it's going to be spoilers for iZombie if you haven't seen iZombie. Well, I'll try not to talk about it, but I've heard some very interesting discussions about people's opinion about that particular series finale. Some people didn't even like some of the final episodes going up to it, you know, probably like last back half of the season or something, just because they felt like so much stuff was rushed. And obviously that's always a big complaint when stuff coming to an end, because you kind of have to squeeze a lot into a certain amount, you know, especially TV show wise, you have to squeeze a lot into potentially like a shorter finale, because I've talked about it recently, like a lot of final seasons are shorter. I think typically because I don't think a lot of like creators make that decision. Maybe they do. I think in the Game of Thrones case they did, but I know that, you know, in some cases I think it feels like a network decision to be like, we're not giving you as much money to finish this whole thing out because it's just, we're going into the final season. Like I said, I've had this whole conversation before about why our final season is shorter. It's a whole conversation in its own, like I said, what I kind of talked about, but I feel like there's so much you have to squeeze into a final season. That's why, like, I feel like more often than not, I'm very lenient when it comes to series finale, because I'm like, you did the best you could. Great example would be the series finale of iZombie. I know a lot of people didn't like it because of that respect. There was even a time skip, which I feel like that's a common element in a lot of series finale, because I guess they want to give you, yeah, you might not get any more of the show, but we want to give you a little preview of what it would be like, you know, beyond kind of where some of your characters might have ended up, and iZombie kind of does that. Like I said, I'm not going into specifics, but me even mentioning there's a time skip is kind of a spoiler, but you know, it wasn't the biggest part of the episode, it's the smallest part of the episode. I think another recent example would be like Elementary. It actually kind of surprised me because like the second to last episode of the show does an interesting thing where I'm like, wait, this is how the second to last episode ends. So it's like, what is this series finale going to be about? And I'm going to avoid spoilers too much, but there's a time skip in the final episode. Literally the entire episode is a time skip. To be fair, there's technically 2 time skips in the final episode of Elementary, which kind of surprised me because it's like, where are you going to go? So it can be used in a sense of also kind of like being like, well, once again, kind of showing you where your characters end up. So, but I feel like rarely is it like an entire episode dedicated to it. It's usually like maybe the last chunk of an episode might be dedicated to like a time skip showing you where everything is. I mean, to be fair, this can apply to a lot of things, not just, you know, TV shows. It's going to apply to books, manga, whatever the case may be, you know, when it comes to like an ongoing series coming to an end, you know. I mean, would something be better, a series finale be better if there wasn't a time skip? I feel like the time skip does help, but I feel like in some cases, maybe it depends on the show, because, you know, for iZombie, I heard some people say like the time skip just was unnecessary. I think it's that thing of like, series finales don't always give you all the answers you want. A lot of stuff is left open. That's a conversation I've had before of like, should endings give you all the answers, or should they leave, is it fine that they leave enough stuff open? I guess it depends on how much they leave open, what specifically they leave open. If it's little minute details, I think most people let it slide, but if it's kind of bigger plot points, then people have a problem with it. To me, with iZombie, I was kind of fine with, because I'm like, all the stuff that they kind of don't really answer, I kind of make my own interpretations about where it's, and I think maybe that's the reason why they did it like that, or maybe they didn't want to give a concrete answer. Maybe they wanted to kind of keep things open. I don't know. I'm not in the writer's mind, the writers and or the creator of iZombie, like the TV show. Like, I'm not in their minds to understand what they had in mind when it came to the whole situation. I think they have publicly like talked about it. I just haven't looked into it too much. Because truth be told, I don't really need to know. I'm more so kind of like, it is what it is, and I filled in the blanks myself of being like, oh, it's like this, it's like that, because we get little details about what the world is like after the time skip. So I'm like, you can kind of, you know, speculate based on, you know, and infer from what we've already gathered about how a lot of things played out, why certain things are the way they are. It's a whole thing in itself, you know. To me personally, I think one of the best series finale is 12 Monkeys. I think 12 Monkeys has the advantage of being, for one, a time travel show. I think that can help out a lot. I mean, even look at Timeless. Timeless being a time, like obviously they probably would have preferred, and I've talked about it, when you look at elements in the series finale of Timeless, you could definitely tell they were hoping for a third season. They took a lot of ideas that they would have taken into a third season and kind of condensed it into like a 2-hour finale, and I think they did a very fantastic job with it. Kind of the same thing with Sense8. I don't know how either show, Timeless or Sense8, were able to give a very satisfactory ending, considering they were kind of rushed into like a 2-hour plus finale. In like Sense8's case, it was like 2.5 hours. I didn't expect myself to love it as much. Would I have preferred to season 3? Yes, but they nailed that final episodes. So I'm like okay with like how they ended. And same thing with Timeless. But going back to the example I gave is 12 Monkeys. I think it's because it is a time travel show and the way the story is written, like yes, you can think like, oh, things are going to end up this way. It still doesn't change the fact is that the journey along the way was so spectacular. Like that final season, and once again, I don't know whether it's just because of the mindset I was in. Very rarely with most shows am I going into the final season with every bit of knowledge in my back pocket, essentially. Because prior to the 4th and final season airing of 12 Monkeys, I rewatched seasons 1, 2, and 3. So all that was already in the back of my mind, so that probably made my enjoyment for season 4 even more. Hence why that series finale hit me even harder. It's beautiful, it's amazing. But I think it is one of the best series finales I've ever seen. It's kind of interesting because there's actually no time skip in that case. I mean, in particular because it deals with time travel, but even using Timeless does a little bit of a time skip at the end of its, you know, situation regardless too. So it's just, like I said, it's not always there, but I feel like a time skip is like a common thing. I'm all over the place with this, but I do apologize because it's just such a fascinating discussion to me. Because like iZombie, because I guess like it's one of the ones where I've had a lot of people kind of respond to me how they felt about it, because like they didn't like the way certain things turned out, because obviously it's not a fandom I'm a part of. Obviously would be the whole Game of Thrones situation. It's kind of that same thing of like it has so little episodes and they just didn't like the direction certain character stories went. Some people didn't like the ending, some people were fine with it, they just didn't like the way we got there. It's kind of a conversation I've heard. Once again, this is coming from an outsider who's never seen Game of Thrones, so I'm not going to make my input on like, oh, whether it was bad or good. I've never watched the show, so I'm not going to add in, but this is just what I picked up from other people where they stand on it. So like I said, it just seems like with any good show, the final season needs to be given time to breathe so you can elaborate on stuff, close up any open storylines, or maybe leave them open if that's the way you want to. I mean, a great example of that would be Lost. I won't get into Lost, like, you know, spoilers or anything like that, but I'm someone who walked away really liking Lost, especially the series finale. It wasn't like that for a lot of people. It was just kind of like a, because they didn't get, it's just a show that kind of got lost along the way, you know, in some people's eyes. I don't feel like that, but once again, everyone's, you know, entitled to their own opinion, but I really liked everything about Lost. I know that's not the case for everyone because they feel like there's so much that was left unanswered. You bring up so many interesting questions and only some of them get answered. And that's one of those shows where it's like, maybe because, you know, I was binging everything, it didn't sit with me the same way other people did, because it's the whole conversation I've had before. I watched Lost all at once. I mean, granted, I took breaks in between to watch other stuff, but I had access to Lost all at once. People had to wait week to week and months between seasons, so obviously you're going to have a different experience with the show. I'm going to have a different experience with the show than most people would, especially if they watched it when it was originally airing on TV, you know? So I think that's also another thing that kind of has to be contributed, whether or not, like, because a series finale might hit differently week to week than if you watch an entire show all at once. I don't think I've ever done that, currently speaking. I guess most recently would be like, to a certain extent, Smallville, because a couple years ago I went back and rewatched the entire series. But because I remember seeing the series finale originally, and I still liked it, so I don't know if it felt differently, considering the fact is I watched more of the series when I rewatched it, obviously, than I had when it originally aired on TV. A whole conversation in itself. And like I said, there's also the conversation about series finales that are done in a way where it's like you're not 100% sure whether like they've written an ending to be left open the way it was, or whether it's because they had the intentions of making more. Great example, Jessica Jones. Won't spoil the series finale, but the way that was left is kind of like you definitely see there's room for more, but that was because the show was canceled like before the 3rd season had come out. So it's kind of, I think it might have even, I don't think they were still in production. I'm pretty sure they were done well before then, but it's like that. I think that was written in a way where it's like, oh, in case we get a 4th season, but maybe they did write it. The same thing for Into the Badlands. I'm still not sure whether that ending was written where it's like, oh, we knew we weren't getting a 4th season, we're coming back for these last episodes. Because the way that it ends, it leaves so much open in a way where it's like, you definitely can see like a sequel series, or at the very least like a continuation if the show got brought back. Especially the way like some of the actors were like, oh, please, we need to bring this show back. And so the fans are kind of like that too. So I'm like, it's more so like, that was definitely more like a cancellation thing of like, oh, we didn't get we got to give you a series finale, but it's not the series finale we wanted to give you. We had more story to tell. We just didn't get an opportunity to tell it. So that's another contributing aspect that has to be considered in some of the series finale conversations as well. Like I said, this is just a whole discussion of endings I've had before. Like I said, I'm just like fine tuning it specifically to series finale because I feel like it's a whole beast all in itself. I mean, the same thing could apply to, like I said, other mediums as well, but like, you know, I'm just referring kind of specifically TV shows, but still. Like I said, this is just kind of my mindset. Obviously, I'd love to continue this conversation in the comments down below. While you're there, also let me know what, in your opinion, is one of the best series finales you've ever seen. What are some you might consider the worst? Because I'd love to get into that conversation too, what people might think it might be a terrible series finale, and I'd love to kind of know why. You know, just because because there might be people, like someone might be like, oh, that was the worst. Other people might be like, that's the best. I'll use a great example. Once again, iZombie. I've heard some people saying they really didn't like it, but once again, like from my perspective, I really did. So it's just, I'd love to kind of get both sides of that thing of both the best and the worst, at least based on people's opinions, you know, whether, you know, see if I agree or I disagree. I think it could be a very fascinating discussion all on its own. But really, that's all I want to talk about. Till next time, be happy, be safe, love life to the fullest, and enjoy it. Good day and goodbye.